Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Keyman 14 release presentation on Keymanweb.com. This is part of our Keyman 14 launch event, and I am Joshua Horton, the current engine lead for the Keymanweb.com engine and website. So, if you are just settling in and this is your first presentation, you should note that there will be 9 seminars in all this week. We're about halfway through them so far. The schedule and links may be found at the link seen there in the slide, keyman.com/14/webinar. Recordings will be made available at the same link afterward. Give it about a day since we've got to make sure to properly splice things up so that you're not having to sit through all the dead time, stuff like that. And again, this is the Keymanweb.com one. We have 30 minutes allotted for it, although admittedly, we don't expect it to go for 30 minutes. There will be plenty of time for questions at the end of each of these webinars, and this one is no exception. So, actually, before I get to that slide, just in case, if you're not familiar with Keymanweb.com, let me bring my little Chrome browser over here. So Keymanweb.com is a site where we have our web engine hosted that allows you to try out all sorts of different keyboards from the comfort of your browser without having to manually go out and download the files or actually install any of the Keyman products on your machine. It is fully supported here through the website. So here, for example, I have the Keyman Encore keyboard loaded up. And it is my computer hardware keyboard is a very standard US English. But with this in place, I'm quite easily able to go through and type in this language directly in the comfort of my browser. I can go through, take a look for some other language. Now I know a little bit less how to actually type in Lao, but I'm going to use that language as an example. And so now, having swapped keyboards, I can now try typing Lao directly in the comfort of the browser. Now, of course, that's a desktop demonstration. What happens if I visited this site with a mobile device? So I'm using Chrome's emulation for mobile devices. I do need to refresh the page so this will work properly. But we get a nice web page. Now, a lot less of the detail that we have for the desktop version is displayed, but we can still go through and type Lao in this format as well. And if you wait a second, we can select from all the languages, although the UI might be a little less convenient for this case. That is quite a list. Unfortunately, unlike with most of our main platforms, we have not yet been able to integrate the keyword search into Keymanweb.com. We're hoping to address that in our next version. But we do have integrated crash reporting. So anytime that any major errors, possibly like the one you just saw appear in my little console log there, when that occurs, we'll be notified and be able to address it accordingly when the time comes. Also, something you may have noticed if you visited the website over the past few weeks before we officially release version 14, is that once Keyman goes into beta, we'll actually start using the new version so that it can get more testing. We'll also be sure to note, hey, you are on the new beta version. If you want to swap back to the standard stable version that has been working really well so far, there's a simple click away, and then you're back with the old, more stable version. So it's easy to swap between the old and the new versions and check out the different features. We also have significantly optimized the keyboard loading speed. It used to take a lot longer in certain browsers than it does now. Did I skip one? No, I did not. Just making sure. So Keymanweb.com on the desktop makes use of what we refer to as the Toolbar Ui at present. It's been a long-standing pattern within web.com. So once it loads, You can select from a region in the world that will filter down the set of languages, after which you can then make a selection. We do recognize that this has some limitations. For example, I speak English, and I was born in North America. But English isn't actually here because it originated in Europe. That might be a little bit unintuitive to a few 100 million people, to say the least. So we would like to be able to make some revisions. But if you do want that nice keyword search experience, you can still get that from the main Keyman.com site. If I come over here and say, hey, find me the English keyboard, and I just perhaps select SIL Euro Latin. When viewing this on a desktop platform, not only do we see that wonderful green install keyboard button, but we have this use keyboard online button right here. If I click that, well, we're right to it on Keymanweb.com. So while it's not directly integrated into the Keymanweb.com page, it is still integrated as part of our keyboard search on desktop platforms. So you can still search for it with relative ease if you go through it from that angle. So again, that nice little blue button underneath install keyboard will allow you to test out on Keymanweb.com. Also, as is visible on our desktop platforms, we have bookmarklets that can actually load the keyboard as functions on this page into a browser bookmark. That then, when you click that bookmark on another page, say the main Google page, you can then load up that keyboard and type with that language in Google, even if your actual physical keyboard does not support it. Now, this does require certain things of the page, and for example, some Google web apps, I've noted Google Sheets when trying to make this presentation wasn't a big fan of the keyboard, and Translate.Google also seems to have issues, which that latter is personally a little more unfortunate. But for a great many pages, this will allow you to interact with those pages using entirely different languages from what your keyboard itself actually supports. And that's our main part of the presentation. Now, before I open for questions, I would like to mention a few places that we are hoping to go in the next version, assuming our roadmap stays consistent. One of those things is that we would like to do some significant improvements to the keyboard selection process itself. Like has been noted, you have to actually go to the Keyman.com page to do the keyboard search on desktop platforms. And on mobile, we just have that gigantic list, which isn't exactly the most ideal. It would be nice to make that more convenient on the site. Furthermore, it is the platform that while it currently does not support predictive text, it is by far the platform that is the closest to having that enabled. And so we are considering putting in work to where on mobile devices, we could use predictive text on the site itself and not just on the mobile devices. We can't support that yet at this time because there's some infrastructure missing on the back end to supply the needed files, because websites don't function quite as well with KMPs as our other platforms do. But once that's in place, we'll be able to serve the dictionaries over as well and actually be able to have that as a feature on the site too. And with that, we would like to open for questions.
How do you change between the versions? So on the Keyman website, if the beta version is up.
Right, unfortunately, it's not up at the moment, so I'll have to go find an older screenshot for it. But there will be a banner very prominently displayed on the site. If you can allow me a minute, I should be able to find a good screenshot for that.
Joshua, If you are willing to play around with the address bar, you can just add the tier parameter to the URL.
Oh, and it will still do that?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, it won't go to beta, but it will go to alpha.
Oh, sure enough.
Put a screenshot from a pull request that shows the banner button.
And that's what I was starting to search. But yeah, Mark pointed out we can work with it here. So I believe there was also a little bit of a graphic here in the corner that I'm not seeing at the immediate moment, but clearly displays that this is a pre-release version. It's not the current stable. And we can click this to return to the stable without issue. When beta is up, we'll actually have a very similar banner saying that we're in beta, and you can swap to that beta version. It's just, since we're not actually in beta for 15 yet, we're not even through planning in full for it yet. We don't have that banner up on the stable site at the moment.
Thank you.
So how can we check the current version? Right. So for the current version, I do believe that there is some sort of a hotkey shortcut that has been established, although I always admittedly forget what that shortcut is that does allow it to display from the OSK.
Yes, so it's just Control, Shift, and double click on the footer of the on-screen keyboard.
Assuming your Mac system doesn't want to do something else.
Yeah, and maybe Option Shift on there, or it may not actually work on Mac OS. That's a Windows.
Right, and I am presenting from a Mac OS system, so that is a bit rough. If you're on a desktop device and you are not afraid of the developer console, you can also find out fairly simply by going into sources. It's always served from s.keyman.com. And well, right there you can tell. KMW/engine, and then you see the version number. We do maintain separate copies for each version that we release, and they persist online. And so you can reference fairly simply from that. If you're the type that would like to embed this within a web page of your own, this is the same link that is accessible through our cloud API whenever you query for the current version of the Keyman web engine. So Keyman Web uses that very same API to stay current with the most recent version for what it displays as well. You can even see the keyboard version there. So as far as your last question in the chat, if you do not specify a specific version string or tier, it will go with the most recent version of beta if we are in beta, or stable if we are in stable, or you've clicked back to stable. I do believe it is possible to specify a precise version through a URL parameter, but unless you're going that power user, it's going to be the most recent version of the tier that you might have selected.
Would you believe that the URL parameter is the version?
Oh, that's crazy talk. Not really, obviously, but. So from the user point of view, so if I'm going along and typing random things here, which is very much not legit LAO, I literally just randomly hit keys. Of course, it's shifted under me. Right, I was debugging something on that recently. Ignore that little pause. I can copy that string over, go away, and paste that elsewhere. Ideally, that would also work on mobile devices. Unfortunately, I cannot demonstrate that in the Chrome emulator. There seems to be a bug affecting that in particular, but I believe on an actual physical iOS device or possibly even on Android devices, it may be possible to click that copy and automatically have it be properly selected and copied to that device's clipboard and pasted elsewhere. So for search, to demonstrate something reasonable, I'm going to want to go with a language that I actually recognize. Let's see. Oh, right. It's not the keyboard I was expecting. So that is literally Keyman, the language name. So if I then tell it I would like to Google search.
I think you might have misspelled it, but that's
Oh, did
okay.
I? Whoops.
Yes, it's the wrong vowel.
Oh, right. Right. Keyman spelling is hard. Yeah,
Margaret
now
just
that
added
was
that
Keyman.
as an example.
And so straight into a Google search, or for those who like using Twitter, you could post it through. Oh, that might be a detail worth looking at. I haven't messed with that in a while. So, well, that note to get worked on. Fortunately, the site is a little easier to make adjustments on this nature too, as needed. The web engine itself is the focus of our main version releases. Twitter has probably updated some things on us. Actually, since I have it up, the demonstration on that bookmarklet that we were talking about, I've literally just dragged my keyboard here, up here. That's all I did. And so now I'm going to go Google search. But this time, let's see, what's another word I might want to search for? You know, as soon as you start thinking about it in those terms, it's like, gosh, what do I even type, right? All right, I have to actually activate the keyboard. Click out, click in. Does it need to be on the main site before the search, perhaps? Ah, there it goes. It just took it a moment. All right, so. Oh, there's a little wow piece that got left over there, which, yeah, that would be an issue if so. There we go. And so now I'm able to actually type in test in the Google page. Although, unfortunately, as soon as you hit the enter key and it changes the URL there, you kind of had to click on it again because that's how Google works. But I'm able to load up that keyboard again and start typing again in that fashion.